Hi, Rich Tabor for RPM News Weekly here in Middleborough, Massachusetts at the New England Motor Press Association Garage. And I'm speaking with Michelle Krebs, Executive Analyst for Cox Automotive. We've just had a very interesting evening with two Hondas, and they sort of represent the spectrum of what's really going on in the industry right now. We've got the Honda Passport that's right behind me, and just beyond that is the Honda Civic. So there's been this kind of switch from in the car buying public from sedans and what we usually call cars to more utility vehicles. I think everyone knows that. You see it on the roads wherever you go. Is there something that can really describe what's happening and why that's happening?
First of all, let's say cars are not dead. They're not going to be dead for a while. Yes, they've fallen a bit out of favor with a lot of buyers. The utility vehicles have gotten so good. One of the big barriers for people buying them in the past is they tended to ride on a truck platform, and so they had a bit of a trucky ride, and also the fuel economy was not as good. Well, the automakers miraculously have made incredible improvements in fuel economy, and they put them on car platforms, so they're much more comfortable, agile to drive. And we have seen this huge surge in the last few years of SUVs, crossovers, whatever you want to call them, outpacing cars. But it doesn't mean cars are going away.
It wasn't really that predictable, though. I don't think that most people expected it. We saw people turning to utility vehicles. They made great family vehicles if you weren't going to get a wagon or if you didn't want to see yourself in a van. But as far as how they've taken off and they're outselling cars in the United States, at least, that was not seen. Is it likely that there'll be another trend coming up in the next 5-10 years that you're seeing that might even eclipse that?
We're not seeing what that is. We do think there is going to be something after SUVs, but we're not seeing it just yet. And I would say this is a global trend. This is true in China. This is true in Europe. Maybe not to the degree in the U.S. because we have much cheaper gas prices and we have bigger spaces.
Well, could that trend be electric vehicles, or is that likely?
Well, I think one of the things, electric vehicles have had great growth, but they're still a teeny-weeny part of the market. I think we sold 250,000 of them last year, like 1% market share. But interestingly, except for one vehicle, the Tesla Model X, which is very expensive, they're all cars. I think what will be interesting is when we start seeing electric SUVs come onto the market, we may see sales increase because that's a body style that consumers want. And we're going to start seeing a bunch of those. I've seen the Mustang-inspired Ford electric sport utility. I just got back from Europe where I saw the Audi e-tron being made. I think that will give Tesla a run for its money, and there are a whole bunch of those coming. So I think that's going to be an interesting change.
Do you see events like the Formula E races that have come to New York City, where you see super high-performance electric vehicles? Do you think that that's going to have much of an influence on the public?
I think with the public, it's more, there's a segment of the population that buy electric vehicles for the environmental reasons, and they don't want to stop at gas stations. I think they need to be more affordable, and we have to have longer range, and we have to have more infrastructure in terms of charging stations. And then I think we may see them take off more. I think one of the first places we're going to start seeing a lot of electric vehicles are in company fleets. I know electric companies are talking about buying electric vehicles for their fleets, and I think that will get the ball rolling. So it's more about getting consumers exposed to them.
Well, I see that's true in some of the municipalities too. Is that they're turning to electric vehicles for their fleets for the business they do for either city or the towns. Well, it's kind of an interesting thing to note too that with manufacturers that are now introducing some new models, which they're calling utility vehicles, they look a little bit more like glorified hatchbacks. Maybe where the suspension has been put up a little bit, but
a sport utility vehicle is a hatchback and a station wagon. It's kind of those two. We seem to not like hatchbacks and not like station wagons in this country. sport utility vehicles are both of those. So it's kind of funny that we say that.
Yeah, well, that's a good way of putting it, to make that observation. But do you see manufacturers sort of like kind of threading the needle a little bit with some of the vehicles which are relatively small? I mean, they're compacts, maybe not subcompacts, but they don't have a large footprint, but they've been given all-wheel drive and the suspension has been put up a little bit.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with packaging. So when we ask consumers, why are you buying a utility vehicle? They give us 3 reasons. Cargo space and the versatility of carrying cargo and passengers, the higher seating position, and also that ease of entry and exit. And that comes in 2 different forms. The older population likes the easy way of getting into sport utility vehicles. The younger generation, the older millennials now having children and have to have them in safety seats till their voting age. That's why they're choosing sport utility vehicles.
Well, what about those first entering the market? I mean, there's some talk that they're not that interested in utility vehicles because that's the cars that their parents have driven and that they're looking for something different. Is that likely to turn the trend back towards the traditional car?
I don't think we'll ever see a heyday of sedans again. But we do see first-time buyers, younger buyers. Their first vehicle is probably a car, and mostly for affordability reasons. And so, the manufacturer that gets someone in on the ground floor and then can move them up the ladder should win.
Well, that makes it a little bit peculiar, and one wonders then with a company like Ford that has decided to go more towards the utility vehicle and basically discontinue their car line, what they're seeing. Are they reading different tea leaves?
No, they have things in the works. I've been in their design studios, and they're thinking about what's next, and they've promised to have some entry-level vehicles. Whether they'll be under $20,000, I don't know. General Motors is kind of getting out of that market. They've still got a few inexpensive vehicles, cars, but I'm not sure they're going to be able to move them up the ladder. Fiat Chrysler has counted on Fiat as its entry level, and that has not turned out so well.
No, it hasn't, not for them. But it is an exciting time, and I'm glad we had a few minutes to talk about all the changes in the automotive industry.
It is an interesting time. We are on the verge of massive change. When it comes exactly, and who's going to be in it, and who's going to make money from it, that's the big questions.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. Here we are in Middleborough. Rich Tabor for RPM News Weekly here with Michelle Krebs from Cox Automotive.